Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel NPA Discovery, where we look beyond the famous roles, iconic photographs, and unforgettable movie scenes to discover the complicated human stories behind the performers we thought we knew. Today, we are talking about Jeff Conaway. For millions of people, one image comes immediately to mind. The leather jacket. The slick back hair. The confident grin. Kenickie. The rebellious, swaggering best friend of Danny Zuko in Grease. For another generation of viewers, Jeff Conaway was Bobby Wheeler on Taxi, the handsome actor driving a cab while waiting for his own big break. And years later, science fiction fans would know him as Zach Allen on Babylon 5. On screen, Conaway often seemed energetic, charming, funny, and effortlessly cool. But the life behind those performances was far more complicated. He began working professionally when he was still a child. He experienced family instability early. He spent years on stage before most children had even decided what they wanted to be. He became part of one of the most successful movie musicals ever made. He joined one of television's most celebrated sitcom ensembles. And yet, behind the visible success was another story. Chronic pain. Prescription medication. Addiction. Career frustration. Broken relationships. Attempts at recovery. Relapse. Public humiliation. And an increasingly desperate struggle to regain control of a life that once seemed filled with possibility. So do I agree with the dramatic claim that Grease made Jeff Conaway famous while the injury he suffered during Greased Lightning ultimately sent him toward tragedy? Partly. The injury appears to have been an important chapter in his long struggle with pain and medication. But I think saying that one movie scene caused everything that followed makes a complicated life sound too simple. Addiction rarely has one cause. Pain can contribute. Trauma can contribute. Stress can contribute. Environment can contribute. Relationships can contribute. Genetic vulnerability may matter. Mental health may matter. Availability of drugs may matter. And sometimes several of those forces collide inside one person. Jeff Conaway's story deserves more than a single dramatic explanation. Because underneath the famous movie, underneath the addiction, and underneath the disturbing final years was a human being who repeatedly tried to start over. Sometimes he succeeded for a while. Sometimes he fell back. But he kept looking for a version of life that hurt less. And that is what makes his story tragic. Not simply that he struggled, but that he seemed to understand what was happening to him and still could not always escape it. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves classic Hollywood and television history, and subscribe to the channel. And stay with me until the end, because Jeff Conaway's life leaves us with an important question. What do we owe people whose worst struggles happen in public? Do we treat them as entertainment? Do we reduce them to their mistakes? Or do we try to understand the pain underneath the behavior? Let's begin. Jeffrey Charles William Michael Conaway was born on October 5, 1950, in New York City. Performance was already in the family. His parents were involved in acting and other creative work, including music, production, and publishing. For many children, becoming an actor requires breaking away from the expectations of home. For Jeff, entertainment was already part of the atmosphere. But artistic familiarity did not mean family stability. His parents separated when he was very young. Jeff was only around 3 years old. Afterward, he moved with his mother and sisters to South Carolina to live with his grandparents. Think about what that means for a small child. At 3, you may not understand marriage. You do not understand legal separation. You do not understand why adults stop living together. You simply understand absence. Someone was there. Then they were not. A home existed. Then home changed. We should be cautious about turning every childhood disruption into a diagnosis. Not every child whose parents divorce becomes damaged. Not every painful childhood event determines adulthood. But early instability can shape the way a child thinks about security. And Jeff's childhood was about to become unusual in another way. His mother continued pursuing acting work. When Jeff was around 10 years old, she began taking him to auditions. One of those opportunities led to a Broadway production. Suddenly, the boy who had already experienced dramatic changes in family life entered another demanding environment. Professional theater. For an adult actor, a Broadway schedule can be exhausting. For a child, it can transform childhood itself. Jeff appeared in All the Way Home. The production ran hundreds of performances. And that number is easy to read too quickly. Hundreds of performances. Not rehearsals at school. Not a family talent show. Professional performances. Night after night. Week after week. A child repeatedly entering a theater, putting on costume and character, delivering lines, hitting cues, and learning that the show continues whether or not you feel tired. That experience teaches discipline. It can build confidence. It can also teach something more complicated: your value is connected to performance. People applaud when you perform. Adults approve when you perform. You are needed when you perform. The audience expects you. This can become psychologically powerful. Many child performers later describe difficulty distinguishing who they are from what they do. When applause becomes part of childhood, ordinary life may feel strangely quiet. Jeff also toured with another production. Again, what sounds glamorous in a biography may have felt very different in daily life. Travel. Schedules. Rehearsals. Adults. Waiting. Performing. A young person living inside a professional routine. By the time most teenagers begin exploring identity, Jeff had already experienced employment. And eventually, he wanted something different. He stepped away from acting and tried music. This is where Jeff Conaway's story becomes especially important. Because the public sees outcomes. It does not always see cost. Audiences saw Grease. A gigantic success. A cultural phenomenon. A young actor with a recognizable role. Professional momentum. Behind the scenes, Jeff was dealing with physical pain. And this gap between public success and private suffering can become extremely dangerous. People assume successful individuals are okay. Friends assume they have support. Family assumes money solves the problem. The individual may even believe, I have no right to complain. Look at what I have. So they continue. This happens outside Hollywood every day. A businessman has a beautiful home and panic attacks. A teacher is loved by students and privately depressed. A doctor saves lives but has an addiction. A social media creator posts smiling photographs while barely functioning. We judge emotional health using visible evidence that may have almost nothing to do with inner reality. Jeff was entering one of the busiest periods of his career. He did not have unlimited time to stop. Hollywood rewards momentum. If you disappear too long, someone else gets the part. If a production is waiting, you work. Pain can become something you manage rather than something you heal. And this is where medication becomes especially seductive. It can allow you to continue meeting expectations. At first, the pill may appear to protect the career. Eventually, dependence may begin damaging the very career it was helping you maintain. That transformation often happens gradually. There is rarely one morning where a person says, "Today I will become addicted." Instead, I need something for the pain. Then, I need a little more. Then, I need it to sleep. Then, I need it to function. Then, I cannot function without it. The border is crossed quietly. During the Grease period, Jeff became romantically involved with Rona Newton-John, Olivia Newton-John's sister. They eventually married. Jeff also became a stepfather. For a man whose own childhood family had broken apart early, building a family of his own may have carried special meaning. But fame, addiction, physical pain, and career pressure can put enormous strain on relationships. The marriage eventually ended. We should be careful not to assign one simple cause. Relationships collapse for reasons known only fully to the people inside them. The source suggests Jeff's substance problems may have contributed. That is plausible within the story, but it should not be treated as the only explanation without stronger evidence. What matters is the accumulating pattern. Career instability. Pain. Substances. Marriage ending. Professional disappointment. One loss creates stress. Several losses create a system. This is how people spiral. Not because one terrible thing happens. Because recovery from one thing is interrupted by another. Imagine trying to repair addiction while your marriage is failing. Trying to repair marriage while your career is declining. Trying to repair career while chronic pain continues. Every problem drains energy needed to solve the other problems. Then substances offer temporary escape from all of them. This is why telling someone to just stop using drugs often misses the architecture of dependence. If the substance is functioning as pain control, emotional anesthesia, sleep aid, coping mechanism, and routine simultaneously, removing it creates a vacuum. Recovery requires building replacements. Medical treatment. Therapy. Structure. Relationships. Purpose. Pain management. Accountability. Community. Otherwise the person is asked to give up the one tool they have without receiving another. By the late 1980s, Jeff appears to have recognized the seriousness of his situation. He sought treatment. That matters. Jeff attempted to stop using pain medication and regain control. This is where we need to challenge one of the most damaging myths about addiction. People often imagine recovery as a single dramatic decision. The person hits bottom. They enter treatment. They become sober. Music plays. The credits roll. Real recovery is often much less cinematic. There may be progress. Relapse. Another treatment. Months of stability. A medical procedure. Pain returns. Medication returns. Shame. Another attempt. Years of improvement. Another crisis. This does not mean treatment failed. It means addiction is often chronic and complicated. Imagine someone with diabetes needing repeated medical management. We do not say, you needed treatment again, therefore you never wanted to get better. Yet people say exactly that about addiction. Jeff repeatedly sought help. He also repeatedly struggled again. Those facts can coexist. Recovery should not be measured only by whether someone achieves permanent abstinence immediately. Every period of stability matters. Every attempt teaches something. And every relapse is dangerous, but it does not prove the person never cared. Near the end of the 1980s, Jeff seemed to be trying to rebuild. He began another relationship. He married Carrie Young around 1990. He returned to movie work. Perhaps, for a period, he believed the worst had passed. Life rarely moves in clean acts, but there was still another important career chapter ahead. In the 1990s, Jeff Conaway found another role that would become deeply meaningful to fans. Babylon 5. The science fiction series developed a loyal audience. Jeff played Zach Allen, a security officer. According to the source, the opportunity began relatively modestly and expanded when the production liked what he brought to the role. This is important. Because by then Jeff was no longer the young man from Greece. Hollywood is not always gentle with aging performers, especially performers whose early fame depended partly on attractiveness. The industry constantly produces younger faces. A former heartthrob can struggle with the question, who am I when I am no longer being hired to be the beautiful young man? Character roles can offer an answer. You become interesting in different ways. Experience enters the face. Age creates authority. The performer no longer needs to compete with the photograph from 20 years earlier. Babylon 5 gave Jeff an opportunity to matter to a new audience. And this is one of the most hopeful parts of his professional story. Careers can have second acts. A person does not always need to reclaim the exact version of success they had at 28. Sometimes the next chapter is different. A musician becomes a producer. An athlete becomes a coach. An actor becomes a character performer. A business founder becomes a mentor. We suffer unnecessarily when we define success only as returning to who we used to be. Jeff could never become young Kenickie again. He did not need to. Zach Allen allowed him to be someone else. And science fiction fans remember him warmly for it. That matters. One of Jeff Conaway's deeper struggles may have been the contrast between past and present. Imagine being recognized everywhere for a movie you made when you were in your 20s. Fans show you photographs. You see the leather jacket. The body. The face. People say, "You were so handsome." Maybe they mean it lovingly. But age transforms the compliment. Because the photograph becomes a mirror you cannot compete with. This is a problem many public figures face. The world keeps replaying their youth. They have to keep aging in real time. You can watch Grease today and Jeff Conaway is permanently young. Press play tomorrow. Still young. 20 years from now. Still young. But the real Jeff aged. His body accumulated injuries. Pain changed movement. Medication changed appearance. Time changed everything. This can create a cruel psychological split. The public loves the frozen person. The living person has to accept change. And this is relevant to all of us now because social media has created permanent archives of younger selves. Old photographs. Videos. Memories. Filters. We can compare our current bodies to ourselves at 19 every morning. That is not always healthy. Aging should not be interpreted as losing a competition with your younger self. You are supposed to change. The objective is not to remain 25. The objective is to become someone worth becoming at 50. Jeff's later career showed that reinvention was possible. But his physical and emotional struggles continued underneath it. By the 2000s, reality television transformed the way celebrity addiction was presented. Instead of addiction remaining private, it could become programming. Jeff appeared on shows including Celebrity Fit Club and later Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. And this period of his life is difficult to watch. Not because addiction was new. But because the suffering was now happening in front of cameras. Viewers saw a man who looked dramatically different from the young actor remembered from Grease. He appeared physically unwell. He struggled. He went through withdrawal. He discussed chronic pain. He became emotionally volatile. He revealed dark details about his history. And television turned all of it into episodes. This creates an ethical question. When does documenting recovery become exploitation? There can be value in showing addiction honestly. Viewers may understand that addiction is not glamorous. Families may recognize patterns. People struggling privately may realize they need help. Public figures can reduce shame by speaking openly. But the presence of cameras changes everything. Reality television needs drama. Recovery needs safety. Reality television rewards emotional intensity. Recovery often requires privacy and stability. Reality television edits life into narrative. Recovery is messy and does not follow episode structure. Those incentives can conflict. Jeff became more famous again. But now he was famous partly for being sick. That is a devastating transformation. The young actor once wanted audiences to watch him perform. Now audiences were watching him unravel. Think about the difference between these two sentences. Jeff Conaway was struggling with addiction. And, tonight, millions of people will watch Jeff Conaway struggle with addiction. Those are not emotionally identical realities. Once suffering becomes content, the person may lose control over the meaning of their worst moments. An editor chooses which scene viewers see. A producer chooses the promotional clip. The audience sees an hour. The person lives 24 hours. That distinction matters. It is easy to judge someone based on edited fragments. A person appears angry, manipulative, weak, unstable, but addiction can produce behavior that does not represent the person's entire identity. This is not an excuse for harmful behavior. Accountability still matters. But we should avoid confusing a person at their most impaired with the totality of who they are. Imagine being filmed during the worst week of your life. The ugliest argument. The panic attack. The hospital. The night you said something unforgivable. Now imagine strangers watching that footage years later and believing they know you. That was part of Jeff's reality. His decline became visible. And visibility can produce shame. Shame, unfortunately, often feeds addiction. The person feels worthless. So they use. Then they feel ashamed that they used. So they use again to escape the shame. A closed loop. Breaking that loop requires compassion and responsibility at the same time. Too much shame and the person collapses. Too little accountability and destructive behavior continues. Recovery lives between those extremes. During his public recovery period, Jeff also spoke about disturbing experiences from childhood. According to the source, he described being victimized and terrorized by older boys when he was young. We do not need graphic detail to understand the emotional significance. Childhood trauma can remain active long after the event ends. The body grows. The person becomes famous. But the nervous system may still react to threats learned decades earlier. This does not mean trauma automatically causes addiction. Many survivors never develop substance problems. Many people with addiction do not report the same trauma history. But trauma can contribute to the need to escape uncomfortable internal states. Fear. Shame. Hypervigilance. Numbness. Depression. Pain. Substances can temporarily alter those states. And temporary relief can become dependence. This is why addiction treatment that ignores trauma may leave a major part of the problem untouched. Imagine trying to remove smoke from a room while ignoring the fire behind the wall. You can open windows. The air improves. Then the smoke returns. A person may stop using substances temporarily, but if the internal pain remains overwhelming, the motivation to escape remains. Jeff's willingness to discuss his childhood experiences publicly revealed a man trying to explain himself. Maybe to the audience. Maybe to doctors. Maybe to himself. Understanding the origin of pain is not the same as healing it. But understanding can be the beginning. Jeff also revealed that he had struggled seriously with self-destructive thoughts and behavior. The source describes a history of repeated attempts to end his life. We do not need the methods. The number and details are less important than the reality. At various points, Jeff apparently reached a level of despair where continuing life felt unbearable. That should change the emotional frame of his story. What looks from the outside like celebrity behaving badly may sometimes be a person in profound psychological distress. Again, this does not erase consequences. People can be suffering and still hurt others. Both truths matter. But when somebody reaches that level of hopelessness, ridicule becomes particularly cruel. Society often reacts to addiction with anger. Why doesn't he just stop? To suicidal despair with confusion. What does he have to be unhappy about? That second question reveals how badly we misunderstand emotional pain. Jeff had fame. Money at different points. Friends. Fans. Iconic roles. None of these immunize a person from despair. Mental suffering is not an accounting problem. You cannot say, one famous movie plus one successful sitcom plus thousands of fans equals no right to be depressed. Pain does not calculate that way. We hear this phrase whenever a famous person struggles. He had everything. Did he? Everything visible, maybe. But what does everything actually mean? A successful career? A beautiful partner? Money? Recognition? Those things matter. But they do not replace a body without chronic pain. A nervous system that feels safe. Stable sleep. Emotional regulation. Trust. Connection. A sense of purpose. Freedom from addiction. If you have fame but cannot get through the day without chemical relief, do you have everything? If thousands of strangers love a movie character but you hate yourself, do you have everything? This is why external success should never be used as proof of internal well-being. And this is not only about celebrities. The coworker with the best salary may be suffering. The neighbor with the perfect family photographs may be suffering. The student with perfect grades may be suffering. We should become slower to say, "But your life looks so good." Sometimes looking good is part of the problem. People feel pressure to protect the image. They become afraid to ask for help because asking would contradict what everyone assumes. Jeff Conaway's public unraveling removed the image completely. The polished Kenickie persona disappeared. Viewers saw vulnerability they had never expected. And unfortunately, vulnerability on reality television can invite cruelty. People compared photographs. Made jokes. Asked what happened to him. The more compassionate question would have been, what happened inside him? Jeff had periods when he appeared healthier and reported being free from certain pain medications. He underwent additional back procedures. He attempted to manage pain differently. He returned to public events. He gave interviews suggesting improvement. Then instability returned. This is exactly why recovery should not be viewed as an on-off switch. If someone remains sober for a year and relapses, that year did not disappear. The brain does not erase it. The family does not erase it. The person learned something. They experienced another way of living. Of course, relapse can be medically dangerous and emotionally devastating. But declaring the entire recovery fake is counterproductive. Imagine learning a language. You practice for 3 years. Then stop for 6 months. Did you learn nothing? Of course not. Progress can be interrupted without being imaginary. Jeff's problem was that repeated interruptions were extraordinarily costly. His body was aging. Chronic pain remained. Relationships were unstable, and each relapse carried risk. Return to Greece. Kenickie walks through the movie full of bravado. His world is cars. Girls. Friendship. Competition. Music. Everything feels young. The future seems endless. That is why watching Jeff's later years can feel emotionally shocking. The body changes. The face changes. The confidence disappears. Pain appears. It is tempting to say, look what happened to him. But a more humane response is, look how much life happened to him. 30 years separate those images. Marriage. Divorce. Work. Injuries. Addiction. Recovery. Relapse. Friendships. Age. Disease. Nobody remains a movie still forever. The goal should not be to preserve youth. It should be to protect life. Jeff struggled to do that. Sometimes successfully. Sometimes not. And so we return to Jeff Conaway. Not Kenickie. Not Bobby Wheeler. Not Zach Allen. Jeff. A little boy whose parents separated before he could fully understand why. A child who entered Broadway before most children had learned what adulthood even meant. A teenager who became exhausted by performing and tried music instead. A young man who played Danny Zuko before movie history gave the role to John Travolta. A patient who needed relief. A man whose relationship with relief eventually became something far more dangerous. A television star who joined one of the greatest sitcom ensembles of his era. A frustrated actor who believed he deserved more. A husband. A stepfather. A divorced man. A recovering addict. A relapsing addict. A science fiction actor who found a second wave of fans. A reality TV participant whose pain became public spectacle. A man who disclosed childhood trauma. A person who knew what addiction was doing to him. A person who warned others. A person who still struggled to follow his own warning. That is not a simple biography. It is a deeply human one. And I think the greatest mistake we could make is reducing Jeff Conaway to the sentence, "He was the guy from Greece who became an addict." That sentence is too small. He was talented. Complicated. Funny. Frustrated. Driven. Wounded. Sometimes destructive. Sometimes hopeful. Sometimes sober. Sometimes not. He was a human being caught in a battle that did not care how famous he had once been. And maybe that is why his story matters. Because addiction does not check your resume. Pain does not care how handsome you were. Depression does not care whether millions loved your movie. Trauma does not disappear because people applaud. The body remembers. The mind remembers. And sometimes a person spends decades trying not to remember. Jeff Conaway had something millions of people dream about. He became unforgettable. But being unforgettable to strangers is not the same thing as being at peace with yourself. That may be the deepest tragedy. We spend so much of life thinking, if people notice me, I'll be okay. If I succeed, I'll be okay. If I get the role, I'll be okay. If I make more money, I'll be okay. If I become attractive enough, admired enough, famous enough, important enough, then I'll finally feel safe. But life keeps teaching us the same difficult lesson. Outer achievement cannot permanently repair inner injury. It can create opportunities. It can buy time. It can provide access to treatment. It can make life easier in practical ways. But it cannot do the emotional work for us. That work still has to happen. Jeff's body hurt. But his story suggests there were wounds far older than his back injury. Some were physical. Some emotional. Some connected to childhood. Some connected to fame. Some connected to disappointment. Some probably known only to him. And he kept searching for relief. This is why addiction should never be romanticized. There is nothing glamorous about losing freedom to a substance. But neither should addiction become an excuse to strip someone of dignity. People do not become less human when they become difficult. Sometimes they need stronger boundaries. Sometimes they need consequences. Sometimes family members need distance for their own safety. Compassion does not mean tolerating everything. But we can hold someone accountable without enjoying their collapse. That distinction matters. When Jeff appeared on reality television in terrible condition, viewers could laugh. Or they could understand. The cameras showed the consequences. They did not show every cause. That is true in our own lives too. We see someone's worst behavior. We rarely see the entire road that led there. This does not mean excuse every action. It means judge carefully. Because every person contains history. Imagine Jeff at 10 years old. Before the pills. Before the injuries. Before Hollywood. Before the fights. Before the failed marriages. Before rehab. A boy walking into a theater. Excited. Nervous. Ready to perform. Could that child have imagined 60? Could he have imagined millions of people singing songs from a movie he had not made yet? Could he have imagined becoming Kenickie? Could he have imagined Taxi? Could he have imagined chronic pain? Addiction? Hospitals? Reality television? Of course not. Children never see the whole road. Neither do we. That is what should make us humble. You do not know which ordinary choice will become enormous. The injury you ignore. The substance you underestimate. The relationship you neglect. The doctor appointment you postpone. The friend you stop calling. The treatment you are embarrassed to seek. Life accumulates. So does healing. That is the empowering part of Jeff Conaway's story. Not that he found a perfect ending. He did not. But because his mistakes show us places where intervention matters. If you are in pain, seek responsible medical care before desperation makes every decision for you. If a medication begins controlling your life, speak honestly before secrecy becomes a second addiction. If childhood trauma still shapes adulthood, treating the symptoms alone may not be enough. If someone you love is struggling, do not assume money, fame, intelligence, or talent means they should be able to solve it alone. And if you are the one struggling, do not let shame convince you that needing help makes you weak. Shame loves silence. Recovery requires truth. Maybe you have already tried before. Try again. Maybe you went to treatment and relapsed. That does not mean the next attempt is meaningless. Maybe you repaired your life and broke it again. Begin with what remains. Maybe you are 40, 50, 60. Do not spend the rest of your life trying to become 25 again. Become the strongest version of who you can still become now. Jeff's Babylon 5 chapter proves something important. A career does not need to return to the old shape in order to matter again. You can be useful differently. Loved differently. Creative differently. Alive differently. This applies beyond addiction. Maybe your marriage ended. You can still build a meaningful life. Maybe your business failed. You can still become successful differently. Maybe your body changed. You can still become strong differently. Maybe your dream changed. You are allowed to change with it. The tragedy begins when we decide the best chapter is already behind us and therefore the remaining pages do not matter. They matter. Every page matters. Jeff Conaway died at 60. To some people, that sounds old compared with Kenickie. To others, painfully young. Either way, there should have been more time. More roles. More conversations. More opportunities to heal. More chances to wake up and decide, today will be different. But May 2011 closed the book. That is what death does. It turns possibility into history. You and I are fortunate enough, right now, to still be on the possibility side. That means something. Maybe the most respectful way to remember Jeff Conaway is not by staring at his collapse and saying, "What a waste." Maybe it is to look at the full story and say, pain must be taken seriously before it takes control. Addiction deserves treatment before it becomes identity. Success is not proof that someone is okay. Recovery may require more than one attempt, and people should never be reduced to the worst chapter of their lives. Jeff gave us Kenickie. He gave us Bobby Wheeler. He gave Babylon 5 fans Zach Allen. Those performances remain. Press play and there he is again. Young. Confident. Funny. Alive. That is one strange gift of film. It preserves a person in a moment they themselves could never preserve. But we should not use those images to mourn the fact that Jeff aged. Aging was not his tragedy. Pain was. Addiction was. Illness was. The inability to consistently escape the cycle was. Getting older is not failure. Getting older is the opportunity to become someone else. Never wait until your suffering becomes visible enough for strangers to believe it. You do not need to collapse publicly before asking for help. You do not need to lose everything before you deserve recovery. You do not need to become a cautionary tale. You can intervene earlier. You can tell the truth earlier. You can make the appointment earlier. You can set the boundary earlier. You can leave the harmful environment earlier. You can forgive yourself earlier. And you can begin again before life forces the decision. That is the power we still have. Jeff's choices are history. Ours are not. So when you watch Grease again and Kenickie appears beside that famous car, enjoy the performance. Sing the song. Remember the charisma. But remember the person too. Remember that behind one of cinema's coolest characters was a man who spent much of his life trying to manage pain nobody in the audience could feel for him. Remember that laughter in a movie does not guarantee happiness outside the frame. Remember that someone can be beloved and still be suffering. And maybe carry that lesson into your own life. Look more carefully at the people around you. Ask twice when someone says they are fine but clearly are not. Do not treat addiction as entertainment. Do not treat recovery as weakness. Do not assume your successful friend cannot be lonely. Do not assume the strong person does not need support. And do not assume the damaged person is beyond redemption. Some people need 10 chances. Some need 20. As long as they are alive, another chapter remains possible. Jeff Conaway's final chapter was tragic. But yours is still being written. Make it honest. Make it compassionate. Make it courageous. And if you are carrying something heavy today, remember, your worst year does not have to become your identity. Your worst mistake does not automatically become your ending. Your pain deserves attention. Your future still deserves protection. And asking for help can be one of the strongest decisions you ever make. If this story moved you, please give the video a like, share it with someone who remembers Jeff Conaway, Grease, Taxi, or Babylon 5, and subscribe to the channel for more deeply human stories about the people behind Hollywood's most unforgettable faces. And before you go, I want to leave you with one final question. When we remember someone like Jeff Conaway, should we remember the addiction that consumed so much of his later life, or the talented, complicated human being who kept trying to rise above it? Maybe the answer is both. Because understanding someone does not require pretending the darkness was not there. It requires refusing to believe the darkness was all they were. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people whose pain may not be obvious. And never forget that while there is life, there is still the possibility of another beginning. I'll see you in the next story.